Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending the Melaka in Facts Tawari Talk series. This is number 6 in our series this year. And to those who's been following us, we've had talks in Melaka, Badan Warisan, and the Islamic Arts Museum. So today's talk is in collaboration with the Islamic Arts Museum. And thank you for letting us use this great facility. And also it's highly appropriate that the topic today, titled Mosque Architecture in Melaka in Islamic and Regional Context. So it's Islamic arts in relation with the theme of the Islamic Arts Museum. So growing up in Malaysia, and I'm sure most of you would have experienced the same thing, when we see the masjid or the mosque, we see a big onion on top. That would be, for us, that would be an Islamic design. But when I visited Melaka, and I see a different style, the tiered pyramid style. So, and then I see our national mosque back here, just around here. It's got a tudung saji on top of it. So, I was confused. And again, recently I was told that the design of the Petronas Twin Towers was inspired by Islamic influences. So it's quite puzzling growing up. So the question is, did Islam influence our mosque designs? Or did we, you and me, our culture from various different backgrounds, influence the mosque architecture or mosque design? So these are the questions that I have. So maybe I will get an answer today. Our speaker today is no stranger to this kind of questions. He is a practicing architecture historian. He is also an associate professor at the School of Architecture at the National University of Singapore, and where he got his PhD. And he did his postdoctoral fellowship at MIT and at the IIAS in Leiden, Holland. So from October this year to next year in June, he will be the visiting research fellow at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies. So today could be one of his last few lectures for the year. So let's enjoy it. And I would like to, Melaka in fact, proudly would like to welcome Dr. Imran Tajudeen. Please give him a warm welcome.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. And Razat promised me it would be an informal introduction, but in fact it was so formal and tense. So I would like everybody to be more relaxed, and let's enjoy today's sharing. I would like to put it that way. So thank you very much for coming down to the IIM today on a precious Saturday afternoon to listen to this. Today's presentation will be divided roughly into, well, you will see it, I indicate 5 parts, but roughly it's about 4 parts, so I hope to keep to time. Maybe, Raza, if you could help me also, just signal to me when it's half time and so on, if you could. So in the first 1 quarter, I would be introducing precisely the kind of questions that Encik Razak was sharing with us just now, and that is, isn't mosque architecture supposed to be based on what we understand as the onion dome? Yeah, and then how do we situate the kind of mosque architecture that we see instead in places, not just in Melaka actually. So it's not only in Melaka, and that's the introduction for the first 1 quarter of the presentation. And then up to the half point of the presentation, I will be grappling with this very difficult question of what do we know and what can we reconstruct about the Sultanate era Royal Mosque, the mosque that was destroyed in the 1511 Portuguese attack. There is actually enough information to discuss it, but and my discussion today will be only by way of offering some tentative half conclusions, and I hope we can continue these investigations and conversations. And then I will go on to what we today can still see in front of us if we visit Malaka, and that is a number of, to be precise, 3 or 4, it depends on how you read the sources, or 5, 17th and 18th century mosques in Malaka, and then a large number of other mosques dating from the 19th and early 20th century that all belong to what we can call an eclectic Malaka tradition. So I hope by the end of this discussion we get to cover all those in a substantial and sufficiently contextualized way, both historically and in terms of understanding Malacca's situation within a regional framework. So let me begin by looking at the connections and shared histories within which we can understand the mosque with the tiered roof form that we find in Malacca. Like I said, it's not only found in Malacca, and but then how do we situate Malacca's position within the regional and historical context? If we go to Malacca, or if we read some of, maybe not today, I don't know, this is the thing, I wish to be able to ask elderly people in Malacca what they would call the shape of the mosque they find in Malacca. But in some published work on, in mosques in Malaysia that discuss Malacca, I encountered this term, Masjid Potong Demak. Of course, the word potong today is out of fashion, because today we prefer to use the word fashion. In the past we say potong, right? Potongan. So Masjid Potong Demak basically means masjid in the fashion of Demak. So that was one term I encountered in a published form. So I wonder how many, or maybe the elderly who knew this term would have all passed on in the 1980s, 1990s. I do not know, but that would be an interesting thing for maybe Malacca, in fact, to do oral history documentation on the use of certain terms, including terms for mosques. Yeah. There are a few other terms I will mention to you that are in published sources that refer to specific features of the Malacca Mosque. One of them is this. So it seems to point to one antecedent, right? The assumption here is based on Demak. Now in my own scholarship, I contest this centrality given to Demak, because Demak is not the first such mosque. Yeah, it is not the first such mosque. There are earlier mosques than this one that have this form, and its construction also does not fit into all the regional mosque traditions found in the Nusantara. So it is not necessarily the one and only form of the mosque of this tiered roof form that we find in the region. The core structural principle of the Demak Mosque that maybe is well known for many of you is what is called in Javanese soko guru. Soko is tiang, column. A guru is the Javanese version for papat empat. Yeah, so empat, 4 columns, soko guru. And so that is central to the understanding of the structural format of such mosques. But if you go to the Minangkabau region, then you don't have these 4 central columns. Instead, you have 1 central column in the center. That 1 central column is given another name. It's called Tonggak Tuo. Tonggak is tiang. Tuo is, of course, tua. Yeah? Or Tonggak Macu. Macu here is not Macu, the deity, no, Mercu. Tonggak Mercu, an apex column. So, just from this, in my earlier work, we can already see that the Minangkabau tradition structurally is very different, and symbolically as well. So it does not have 4 central columns, it has 1. So that means Sumatra has a different story. And what about Malacca's story? Well, we will come to that later. But and I mentioned, so very quickly I give you some examples. I said Demak is not the oldest. There is the local history of the fact that this particular mosque, Sekayu Mosque in Semarang, is older, but all you have left is this very enigmatic looking 4 core columns, right? The dirakit, so put together by a double beam framework. So this whole thing is then held rigid like that. But the rest of the mosque has been entirely renovated. Once you move out of Demak and beyond Java, in fact, then you find slightly different profiles of mosques. So I show you 3. Now these 2 are from the Banjarmasin region in southern Borneo, so you can see that the profile is very different from Demak. This one, yeah, very different. The ornaments are also different. The construction materials, well, they use local Belian ironwood. Belian ironwood as opposed to teak. So the Javanese use teak. So this is teak, Javanese teak. This one is Bornean ulin or kayu besi. And in Melaka, the mosques all use kayu besi, kayu ulin. Yeah. And in Melaka, you notice the roof profile is not so much like this, right? Oh, sorry, I didn't realize my cursor is not on. So in fact, is there any way for me to use a pointer? No. So is the image on the right? That mosque is from Jambi, and that kind of profile is not the kind you find in Melaka, right? The one in Melaka is closer to the 2 examples on the left, like Banjarmasin, yeah? Where the top tier is more tapered and the lower tiers are more mendatar or more, is less steep. Yeah? The incline is less steep. But we will come to Malaka's own precedents later. So this is still, I'm still floating away from Java, right? Moving to Banjarmasin and then now going to Jambi in the case on the right, but not yet to Malaka. Now, what we just saw are, okay, they are all mosques with tiered roof forms, but where did we get this form from? I find all sorts of explanations that are not actually based on an understanding of architectural typology or architectural history. Instead, we have conjectures. Thank you. Okay, this looks like a gun. Okay, good. I can shoot now. So I was saying, you know, the explanations are based on a kind of superficial in the literal sense. That means you just look at the outside, right? And so it has this roof, and so people make comments like, oh, it's a pagoda, it's all sorts of comments. But actually, if you understood the architectural traditions of the region, then it's already been discussed in a number of works. The conclusion has always been to equate it with either the Javanese and Balinese Meru tower, right, the tiered roof tower, or the Balinese Wantilan halls. And there have been various discussions contesting which one is more appropriate and so on. Actually, if you put it this way, then in terms of the structure, it does not quite, the mosque structure does not quite conform to either. So it is actually different from both, but it belongs in the same cousin of family of tiered roof structures. So for example, this one, well, I'm just going to elaborate on it a little bit. For Meru towers, the upper tiers rest on beams that transfer the weight to columns that don't hold up this roof, right? But that is not the case here. Yeah, so it's slightly different in that sense. In this case, you will have the beam running across the entire structure, but in mosques, there is a very different arrangement to clear at least this part of any beams running across. So you have a taller, and this one doesn't have beams running. This beam is not running in the center, it's running at the perimeter, this beam. Right? So if you can imagine later, I'll show you a photo of an interior. It creates this soaring space free of beams. So that's actually structural innovation. It's very different and it's actually much bigger. So the mosque, the Tajuk mosque in Javanese typology, it's called Tajuk, is much bigger than either structure. So structurally speaking, if you were a carpenter or a builder, you will know it's so different. Yeah? And so that's just elaborating on the point that the mosque architecture that we see in the region is an elaboration and differentiation from what was there before. And just to give you the context, unfortunately we don't have such a rich visual, material, cultural legacy outside of Java. So if you go to Sumatra, you don't have narrative relief panels like this that depict buildings, so we don't have the evidence. So all of this evidence I'm showing you on the left-hand side are from Java. Okay, slightly cropped, so you won't be able to see some things, but so this, for example, you can just about make out one structure here, another one, 1, 2, 3 tiered, 1, 2, 3 tiered. So 3 tiers are predominant. This one has a central column, like the one I was saying for Sumatra. But the Sumatran one it doesn't necessarily have 4 columns surrounding the central column. So It's again a differentiation from the Javanese one, and it doesn't immediately become what we call miniature towers. So these 1, 2, 3 are all miniature towers. They don't create space inside. In Minangkabau, it is not like that. It will be all with space beneath, not just as a kind of payung like this. So these are all payung, right? They don't have space inside. Or if there is space inside, it is miniature like that. So these are Meru towers. They don't actually create spaces that are larger than, say, a very nominal size as big as this rostrum I'm at. Yeah. So I was talking about the fact that in Minangkabau Mosque, the spaces above are real spaces. So this is a magnificent example. Some of you might be familiar with this. Sorry, I use a Singapore reference. HDB is Housing Development Board. It's not 26, like it's 13. I don't know why I put 26. It's more like 13 to 15. But Limau Mosque in Minangkabau, West Sumatra, is 65 meters tall up to here. So it's got one central column, the Tonggak Macu, the Tiang Mercu, and all of these are through upper story, so you can actually go up. So this is where the prayer level is. This ground is higher than the mosque hall inside. And then second, third, fourth, fifth floor. So all are usable. And it's huge. And we have evidence from visual as well as written sources that the Mosque of Jepara similarly had 5 floors like that. And we get the same issue of people saying that this is like a Chinese pagoda, right? But if you are familiar with the construction techniques of the region, you know it's quite different. So it's not the same construction techniques as what you would find in a Chinese pagoda. And this is going to be a bit difficult to understand because I didn't show the visual accompaniment to help you to see it. But if you're familiar with a stupa, the stupa has a hemispherical portion and then a top part above what looks like a cube, right? And then it has a number of tiered umbrella-like formations on top of a Buddhist stupa. So actually all these forms of the pagoda that you see in Nepal, in Burma, in Java, in Kedah, in Bali, of course in East Asia, in Japan, in Korea, and in China, they are all actually enlargements of that umbrella form from the stupa. So originally the idea of these tiered forms, if you look at it from that perspective, come from the Buddhist idea of multiplying elements to note sanctity, right? So this multi-tiered umbrella sheltering the hemispherical form of the stupa. But of course these forms, even if they have that kind of pre-Islamic kind of symbolism, they in the end become just forms devoid of that meaning, and they can be resignified. Yeah? And so they then get used for other purposes. So even in Java at that time, such pavilions, it's a bit washed out, so you can't see the details. There's a female figure there seated in this pleasure pavilion, which is 3-tiered, right there, at the Candi Panataran relief panel. And we get an example of that hybrid formation of having both the payung as well as the true tiered roofs in the case of Masjid Demak. So here in Masjid Demak, oh no wonder, I was waiting for the caption. Masjid Demak is down here, but you have altogether 5 roof tiers. For mosques, unlike for the Meru towers that we saw earlier, the maximum is always 5. So here in the example I'm taking here from Lombok from 1720, which is already very late, you have 11 tiers always signifying Shiva and 9 tiers signifying Vishnu. And so Muslim mosques never take any of those numbers. Mosques will take either 3 or 5, as far as the sources go. I've never encountered one with 7, except there is a written source that says that the mosque at Hitu, in Hikayat Tanah Hitu, mentions that the mosque has 7 pangkat. I do not know what that means. And the mosque at Ternate appears to have 7 layers, but 2 of the layers are what we can call false layers. They are additions. They are not structurally separate layers. So in fact, if you took it down to structural formation, they still have 5 layers with an additional 2. Yeah? So it seems that there's always 5. But whatever it is, it never reaches 9 or 11 as we saw earlier. It's always 5 or 3, and in some cases they mention 7. So I'm just explaining this. And the different dimensions that these buildings achieve, as well as the different materials employed, point to the fact that they have very diverse local origins. So I mentioned Hikayat Tanah Hitu. I'm sorry, the caption disappears again. But this is the Wapawe Mosque from Hila in Lehitu, Ambon, reputedly built in 1414. And it comprises materials that are renewed whenever it is necessary. So you can see the alang-alang thatch, which is black and fibrous. And then you have the bamboo walls, right? And so these are renewed periodically. If you go underneath the eaves, there is calligraphy at the under eave, like this. If my hand is the under eave here, there is calligraphy right here, right there. So this building is not devoid of its calligraphic Islamic elements, if you like. So original calligraphic embellishment exists. That schema exists on the underside of eaves. Yeah? And this is understood as the Tiang Alif as well. So it has this symbolic association. So as I mentioned, even if you say, doesn't this then originate with a use for Hinduism? No, not really. It's re-signified, right? It's completely re-signified. It now becomes an architectural typology, if you like. From there, you go to very large structures like the Royal Mosque in Yogyakarta. So this is the Royal Mosque of Yogyakarta, completed by the 1760s. It is entirely built of kayu jati, teakwood, right? And it has these clear story windows that brings light in. And I mentioned to you the beams. The beams stop here, right? So there's no beam here. And then there's space that soars all the way up to the top. Yeah? So that's what I was talking about. So this is something that requires the structural load and the stabilization of the structure to be transferred away from the center, so that you have all these spaces without any beams. And another thing that I noticed in Malaka, we don't have it on mosques, is the serambi. In Javanese mosque, you will have this front pavilion in front of the main Tajuk Hall. So just now we saw Tajuk Hall of Yogyakarta. If you move to the front, you get the serambi. Yeah? So the serambi in Yogyakarta is, as you can see, is very, very elaborately and magnificently carved and gilded even. Yeah, so it's given it's seen as the more profane, the more public element to the mosque, whereas the interior is this much more sacred, and of course it's the main prayer space as opposed to the community space, as well as the space for the Qadi, for example, for adjudicating cases outside. So it's a community function and a worldly function as opposed to a more religious function inside, which is paralleled by the symbolism of a very concentric, tall space as opposed to a space that is more horizontal. But having said all of this, it seems that I was talking about a tradition of architecture that originated in use for pre-Islamic religion that I seem to have pointed to either Buddhism or Hinduism, right? Because I mentioned the stupa, and then I mentioned the example from Lombok. But actually, there is yet a third derivation for this four-column mosque. And that is within Austronesian, or Malayo-Polynesian is the old term, architectural tradition. There are many building types, many. I know this diagram has been reproduced many times. I've seen many publications reproduce this. So this is actually showing all sorts of architectural traditions that belong to various Austronesian speakers. And if you look out for which examples have four core columns, actually a lot do in different outward manifestations. So the Ifugao, who live in the mountains of Luzon, they have four core columns with red guards, something like this. You find these red guards below the floor of the structure. But if you go to Sumba, the four core columns with the red guards are not beneath the floor, but inside the building, and the red guards are beneath the tall peak roof under the roof. So you get the point. So there is a diagram that somebody named Koji Sato has diagrammed this. So in fact, the four core columns, sometimes they exist in a configuration of 6, belong to an old Austronesian rice goddess cult. which in Malay and Javanese became called Dewi Sri, or Sri Dewi, wife of Vishnu. So actually the cult is older than Hinduism, right? It's already in Javanese and Malay culture, but it got melded with. So it's not something that came with Hinduism, but was already there before, because you find it in other societies in the Malay Polynesian world who did not have Hindu religion embedded into their culture. Right? So this cult of the rice goddess is associated with the place to store the grain. And the 4 core columns become important. So in Javanese houses, they then appear, and Sundanese houses. So in Sundanese houses, the 4 core columns are for the more important kind of granary pavilion where you can sit below. You can also find this in Bawean Island, as my student who is somewhere in the audience will tell you. So this particular form of the granary is in Javanese culture integrated into a house. So it's not a separate pavilion structure for storing granary that is separate from the house. That is in Sunda, West Java. In Central and East Java, this is integrated into the house, as part of the house, just like what you saw in Sumba just now. So in Sumba, it is the house which is the granary. In Java as well, it is the house which is the granary, rather than a separate building. Now, by the time I get to the end of this, you will get why I'm going through this, because this is the formation of the 4 core columns in Javanese houses. It can be the front pavilion, the pendopo, or the core of the house, the omah dalam. And in the core of the house, this is where, so Javanese tradition is a bit rich, it's embedded into the house. Malay tradition seems to recall that by the fact that we call one column Tiang Sri. That Sri refers to the cult of the rice goddess. So above, we would have put in the paran the rice, stored the rice, right? And you know the column formation would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9. The center one is Tiang Sri. So at the center of 9 columns. In Javanese, it's different. They have 4 core columns. This space here is in front of the krobongan, which is where you put Dewi Sri and her male consort. That's Dewi Sri right there. And Sadhana. And then, of course, you still put Muhammad Tangkup Allah and all that, because they've converted. I mean, they're Muslim. And they also put ancestral portraits. So in the Javanese aristocratic residence, the core of the house is a kind of multi-faith shrine, if you like. The earlier shrines are just symbolic now. Dewi Sri is just symbolic of marriage. She's not worshipped, right? So, and then ancestors are just placed there for, well, just the fact that they are honored, right? And then you have Islam. So, I mean, in the Javanese context is that multi-layering in which you can understand why a mosque has the 4 core columns, and the 4 core columns are seen as so important. I have to go through all of this because it's very difficult to understand it from the Malay cultural perspective. And I must add this, actually we forget. In Malaka, if you read Hikayat Hang Tuah, Sulalatu Salatin or Sejarah Melayu, and listen to the Portuguese sources, all these 3 voices tell us there were many Javanese in Malaka. And in fact, Hang Tuah himself in Hikayat Hang Tuah is made to say, when he responded to the female dancers from Indragiri who teased him, we don't know how to dance in Malay, we are not true Malays in Indragiri. And some of you would know Hang Tuah's reply, right? Hang Tuah replied to them, he said, oh, awak ni pun satu. He said, no, actually he said, kita dari Melaka pun Melayu Kacukan, bercampur dengan Jawa Majapahit. It's there in the Hikayat Hang Tuah. So somebody seemed to be the emblem of Malay selfhood and being a Malay hero, actually says that Melaka is Melayu Kacukan, bercampur dengan Jawa Majapahit. So it shouldn't surprise us that Javanese-ness is embedded in Malaka's Malay culture in many ways, including this tradition of mosque architecture. But it's not as simple as that, as I will show you further, because Malaka has 2 communities that dominated its town as well as its immediate hinterland. I just mentioned to you the Javanese were quite an important element in Sultanate period Malaka. But just beyond Malaka, what do you have? Negeri Sembilan, right? The Negeri Sembilan folks are from Minangkabau. And we have also evidence, I'm not speaking about it today, I'm speaking about it for another event. The description that the Sulalatu Salatin gives of Istana Melaka in Sultan Mansur Shah's reign seems to suggest that the palace was built with Minangkabau labor and in Minangkabau typology. It had 17 ruang across. It had a certain number of roof tiers. You can only have that within Minangkabau typology. In Malay typology, there's no such thing. We don't build like that. This particular manner of building and counting 17 ruang and number of tiers is Minangkabau. And it shouldn't surprise us because the connection of the Raja Bukit Seguntang is not to Minangkabau. They don't say that. It's to Palembang. But there is an episode in Malay history which the Sulalatul Salatin does not quite cover, and that is the transfer of the center of the kingdom to Melayu in Jambi, which is connected later on through Aditya Warman to Pagaruyung. So this complicated second episode is kind of glided over in the Sulalatul Salatin, which mentions Melayu in passing at the very start of the opening sequence. So if you read the opening sequence, it mentions Melayu as a sungai that is a subsidiary of from Palembang, Muara Tatang. So it's all these kinds of, it drops a mention here and there, but it doesn't elaborate on it. But having said all of this, I'm trying to show you that even through architecture and trying to understand its cultural roots, and you link it back to Malay textual sources, there's quite a number of puzzling possible connections that appear. But coming back to this, our topic today, which is the mosque, I mentioned to you that, okay, it seems that we have the 4 core columns that link in some way to the idea within Javanese and other building typologies, right, of the sanctified cult house. Yeah? Cult house in the sense that you have a cult house, whether it is in Sundanese culture, beneath the granary where you gather, whether it is in the core of the Javanese house, whether it is in the core of many of these other typologies, from Alor, Toba Batak granary, and so on. So it's also not just Hindu and Buddhist, it seems to be also embedded in Malayo-Polynesian idea of a cult building. And so then you can position these 4 core columns within it. But you know, how it is then manifested centuries later than it's used, say, for Hindu or Buddhist houses of worship, in mosque is so entirely different. And if I had already shown you earlier Banten, then what about if we took in the Grand Mosque of Pontianak, which is completed in the early 19th century, and then the Palembang Grand Mosque. This is not the original mosque that would have been there in the 17th century. This is already a rebuilding from the 18th. But you can see these are two photographs from different periods when the entrance pavilions were renovated. So at one point, the entrance pavilion that had all this form, which is the tiered roof form with all of these ornaments at the ends of the roof ridges. If you look at the mosque, the mosque had 4 such pavilions at the exterior, and then 3 of them were demolished and replaced with these very Greek-looking pediments, right? Triangular pediments with Arabic calligraphy. And then later you can see 3 of them were replaced, but the one over the mihrab was retained. But later on, these were removed, and then reconstructions of the original pavilions were built. So actually, you have a masonry rendition of the kind of wooden roof as entrance portals for Palembang. So it shows you how strongly associated a mosque building is with this tiered roof mosque in the case of Palembang in the 18th century. Yeah, and other examples. I will move forward. Well, this is a clearer picture. I mentioned to you just now granary. I'll just show you a few photographs, the importance of a cult building with 4 columns, and in some cases you get a direct translation between two neighboring groups, Batak Karo, and then next door is Muslim Minangkabau. So Muslim Minangkabau, there is a Lubuk Bau Surau. Actually, it's a surau. Well, I shouldn't have written it as mosque, but that means it's a prayer hall. Lubuk Bau Surau in West Sumatra, with these 4 projecting gables. And then in Batakaro, you find the same form. So this is what I'm talking about, how the same form with a cult status is translated into Islamic use, and the cult status is completely forgotten among the Muslim group. But just next door, it's still there. Just next door. Yeah? And in fact, it's not. You can almost claim that Batak Karo folks are also next door to us, right? They're just across the straits, but we have completely forgotten. It's quite amazing what we remember and what we don't. Yeah? Anyway, I've shown you this as well. This Limau Kaum on the left and on the right is Sungai Puar. Just to tell you that this form is not unique. There are many such examples across West Sumatra. Okay. Yeah, and other examples. So I want you to note that in all of these cases, there is a tapering. There is a tapering. So unlike the Javanese one, which is quite rigid, yes, in the Minangkabau one, there is a tapering. I just want you to remember that. And then you recall what the Malaka Mosques are like. The Malaka Mosque rigid, right? Rigid like this. That means even the angle does not change. Or does it tape, not only curve, but also tapers? I think the answer is quite clear. The Malaka ones seem to resemble the Minangkabau ones more. In terms of both the curve of the profile, which we then now mistake as Chinese, and it also helps that the Chinese were involved in renovating the ridges and adding Chinese swallowtail and so on, you see. So then it's like, wow, it's so confusing, right? So what if I ask Chinese contractors to renovate all these Minangkabau mosques? Then they all become Chinese. No, they don't. Typologically, they were already like that. You know how Minangkabau roof construction is like, right? It's very difficult and it's amazing, right? It's curved. You know, if you look carefully, even the walls of the mosque, the best examples, even this is a good example. You can see it's slightly curved actually. It's not straight, it's slightly curved. And the windows also. And the ends of the walls are also slightly slanting outwards. I'm not kidding you, it's really, really like that. So there are all these curves. Okay, so the whole building has this aesthetic of curves, besides tapering, becoming less steep. Yeah. And then other mosque models, just to say that even on the peninsula, Kota Baru, Kelantan, for example, Teluk Manuk in Patani, so this is the greater Patani region. Yeah, so there's other mosques in Southeast Sulawesi. So it's not always the Tajuk Mosque, there are other mosque forms, but the one that we know best are the tiered roof forms. So imagine if you encountered these kinds of mosques, it's even more confusing, right? Are these mosques? You know, they don't even look like mosques. Well, they are, right? They are also mosques. And in Malacca, we get a representation of this typology, but not the extended gable like that, not the extended gable on a hip roof like this, not this type. We get the normal gable on extended eaves like this, or multiple gables. In this case, Surau Aur in Patani. This is Surau Limbongan, which has been renovated, but it's still there. It's still there by the roadside. Banda Hilir is renovated entirely, but I mean the form is still retained. And Tengkera Pantai is also still retained. As you can see, Chinese contractors were involved, right, in the ridge. You can see that, right? Yeah, with the swallowtail. So again, many other examples. In the case of this is Kota Baru, Surau Mulong, and then this I forget exactly where, but it's in southern, well, not southern Thailand, but the Malay-speaking regions that are now in the southern regions of Thailand, as well as other examples. So there are actually many type mosque forms. And when we talk about translations from the pre-Islamic, we can also look at literacy. So there are quite a number of things to talk about. I just spoke about forms that have been translated. I have yet to come to the terms that we use. And then we also can talk about terms and forms that are unchanged but re-signified. Right? So the form does not change, but it's completely seen as other, like the Tiang Alif, for example. You can see that in literacy too. It's not just a non-literate culture. So if you look at the Terengganu Islamic Legal Code, it's quite famous now, right, for the fact that it says, even though it writes in the modified form of the Arabic script that we call today Jawi, because it has letters for rendering nga, cha, pa, and so on, sounds that don't exist in Arabic. Despite using Arabic words, what does it use to refer to Allah? It doesn't say Allah, it says Dewata Mulia Raya. Don't you need more effort to carve so much more? What does this tell us about the Muslim community of that period? Right? It's a period of translation and transition. So I want to situate the architectural translation and transition within this literate context, so that even when the Malays wrote in Jawi, they still used the term Dewata Mulia Raya. Dewata and Mulia are both Sanskrit terms. Raya is Malay. Right? And then we still refer to fasting as puasa. Yeah? And then what do we say? Firman dan Sabda, right? Firman is Persian, Sabda is Sanskrit. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So this is very interesting for me, because that means it's a literate culture that was conscious of its translations and its continuation of certain terms that are translated in meaning, but not translated in form. The form remains, though. Dewata Mulia Raya is Sanskrit in Malay. But it's now referring not to the old Dewata Mulia Raya, it's referring to Allah. And nobody is unclear about that. Right? Nobody is unclear about that. We have so many terms from Sanskrit that we still use. Puasa, what is this? Dosa, pahala, neraka, shurga. These are all Sanskrit terms. And you see that also in this. So what I'm saying is all of the examples I showed you, if we talk about it as Islamic forms, maybe it would raise eyebrows. But what if I told you that even within literate Islamic culture, such conscious acts of putting the pre-Islamic and the Islamic together in a re-signified way was consciously done. So that's my point here. You will be many of you will be familiar with this because you are all enthusiasts of this, right? So you already know Minya Tujuh tombstones from 1380. This is, but actually when I say 1380 it's a bit problematic because the Arabic script gives a different date from the Kawi script in Old Malay. So actually one says 1380, the other says 1389, and there's been some discussion on why it might be slightly different. Ahmad Majanu tombstone is very interesting. Again, two different dates, 1463 and 1467, giving accounts in Arabic. I'm not showing the Arabic version here, but giving an account of an incident very near Melaka at Pangkalan Kempas in the 1460s. So that's the height of the Melaka period. At the height, just imagine, at the height of the Melaka period, I think this is something we don't really dwell upon enough. At the height of the Melaka period, there were Malays, or in this case perhaps Minangkabau, living in the vicinity of Melaka, still writing in Kawi, and they were Muslim. Why do we forget this? It's quite strange, right? And we don't own this history, I think. I think we don't own it. We keep saying, we were thoroughly Islamized. We are very anxious to say we are thoroughly Islamized. Does this mean you're not thoroughly Islamized if you retain an older script? I don't think so. That's just culture. But today we seem to be that we make that association. That's interesting to me because that means on both sides of the straits, both in Pasai, let's not have this presumption, Pasai was more Islamic, whereas we were not. No, this is Pasai. Minya Tujuh is from Pasai. Yeah? But Pasai also produced these. Yeah? Pasai also produced these that were magnificent products of Islamic calligraphy, very sophisticated inscriptions. But I think you also realize that the tombstone shapes are based on, in this case, is based on Chandi. Yeah, the antefixes, the multi-tiered finial, and then having a base like this. So even for an Islamic tombstone, there are references to Chandi architecture. So you see what kind of very active melding and coming together. I show you this because this is the kind of form that we will see very frequently. This is not Thai, by the way. This is on Javanese relief panels from Borobudur. You will find various manifestations. I would have also put some, but I removed it, slides showing that you can trace this to the kala head and the makara that has been abstracted. So all of these are abstractions of a kala head and makara frame that you would have found on Borobudur and other examples of Chandi as an art form across the Nusantara archipelago. This as well. So this is an abstraction of the kala head and the makara, very flamboyantly taking wing, if you like, on either side of the minbar frame. Yeah? Now we come to the question that I asked you. So having seen all of that, what is 15th century Malacca's expunged royal mosques form? What clues do we have about it? Now it might surprise you to be told, I don't know whether any of you have already heard this before somewhere. I'll be happy to be told that somebody has already discussed this. I think I have not heard anybody discuss this. The location of the mosque of Melaka, we know for sure exactly where it is. We know it's in the Portuguese sources. And it is exactly at the spot of the A Famosa Tower that is indicated in red. The A Famosa Tower is built on the stone foundations of the royal mosque. Today, if you go there, it's not there though. We all celebrate what? the Stadthaus, right? Next door to the Stadthaus, what do you find? Traffic roundabout and traffic. That's the location of the Formosa. But today you have another site which is a Surah Warisan. That's wrong. I will show you later. Right? Now, Malacca, before the rulers converted to Islam, already had a stoneworking tradition. There is one tantalizing clue. You might know about the fact that Malacca has one Makara fragment. One. That means Malacca did build temples. We just don't know where all the stones went. My conjecture is at least some of the stones would have been reused for mosque construction and etc. At least some of the stones, repurposed. Let me look at some evidence and share that with you. So I was saying that we know exactly where it is, and Gaspar Correa is the one who tells us the stones were used for the Portuguese fortress, and there was a large mosque built of stone cubes that required 300 paid local men to pull it down, which was hard work, he wrote. And then there were also other smaller buildings. Take note of the fact that he mentioned smaller buildings and tombstones also built of stone. We will come to these smaller buildings later. But there it is, the Formosa Tower. You notice it's skewed off from the line of the other buildings, right? The orientation, saya ingat sikit kan? Kenapa dia tak ikut lurus dengan yang lain? It's both there as well as there because of the kiblat. I'm so sorry, it's so washed out, but this is Kampung Keling Mosque, and the orientation is exactly the same. So this is Surah Warisan, which is wrong. Right? I told you next to Stadthaus is empty, so that's the location of this. And that's Masjid Kampung Keling, so let me show you the next slide. So if I were to reproduce that here, and took a yellow line, it is oriented to the Qibla. So right there would have been, so Surah Warisan, if you go there next time and you look at the entrance, you know if you turn 90 degrees to your left, you will see the Qibla side. This is not the Qibla, I'm not showing this because this is the building. This is the tower of the, so the Qibla direction is that way. And we know that the Portuguese used all manner of stone they could lay their hands on, including tombstones. Oh, the color is so strange here. So actually, it's not that color at all. It's the nice washed off yellow color of fine sandstone. And Alfonso de Albuquerque, in his commentary, says that the ancient sepulchres of bygone kings were also used to provide materials for the Portuguese fort. And in 1918, this was found at the foot of the hill. It's now in the, well, just next door, right? Museum Negara. The headstone of Sultan Mansur Shah that was hewn and reused as a gravestone. If you read Zakaria Ali, he was conjecturing whether this is the reason that afterwards royal gravestones no longer had, for the Malay Peninsula, did not use elaborate inscriptions anymore, like this, because they were afraid of any possible desecration through conquest, right? Like what happened to Sultan Mansur Shah's headstone. One possible example to compare with, to know the Melaka Mosque's form, would be the Palopo, Masjid Tua Palopo in Luwuk, South Sulawesi. Well, all the Opu Daeng Manambon are from Luwuk, but that's a later period. So this is 1604. If you go to Google Earth or Google Map and looked at the aerial perspective of Masjid Tua Palopo, you will realize it's completely not oriented to the Qibla. In other words, it's most probably initially built as a chandi. So we might be looking here at an actual chandi precedent to the mosque. The Qibla direction is so way off. You have to see it to believe it. Instead of being oriented even slightly off from the Qibla, it's completely wrong. So you know they were not even, when this original mosque, this building was built of stone, and it is of, I don't know whether you can see it. No, you can't. It's so washed out. But if you can really see it, it's the kind of fitted stone block technique that you find used on chandi. It is that technique. But the Mubalik or the proselytizers that the people of Luwu and South Sulawesi in general remember to have brought Islam there are from Minangkabau. And when you go inside, it has a Tonggak Macu. So it seems to confirm the local stories that the Mubalik who traveled to South Sulawesi are Minangkabau. And so even that mosque has a Tonggak Tiang. So it seems to, I'm unsure here, you know. So it seems to confirm, was this built originally as a mosque by the Minangkabau? But why is the stone building completely not oriented? What does this mean? Was there an original building of stone that they I don't know. Yeah, but it seems to be the confluence of many different things. And if Malaka was indeed built of stone blocks, it might have resembled this form. Everything about it points to Chandi architecture. It even has these plinths. You can see the lines, right? And it has the Kala Makara portal frame, which is now obscured by calligraphy. Aceh, what was Aceh building? So Aceh also built of stone for the foundations. Very tall foundations that were then used as forts. And the rest of it would be in wood, like that, in multiple tiers. And if you look at the remaining structures, they are also built of stone, but these are for the pleasure gardens, as well as the gateway to the pleasure gardens, this one. So they're built of stone in this multi-tiered lotus formation. There are many mosques that we know of in Melaka, and we are fortunate that this 1645 map tells us that shows us all of the mosques. So that's the Market Mosque. It's so washed out, but you can see 1, 2, 3 tiers. This is the Grand Mosque. It says in this depiction, maybe it's a schematic on 3, whereas earlier we saw a bigger number of tiers. It seems to imply either 4 or 5. Usually it's not 4, it's either 3 or 5. And one more here. So there are several mosques depicted in Aceh. I have better images of but I didn't show it here, better images from that map, and there are many other mosques depicted from Melaka, and all of them have tiered roofs. So this seems to suggest to us that most likely Malaka's mosque also had tiered roof in the 15th century. I'm very cautious about this because we really don't know. Right? We really, really don't know. How can we assume? But it seems if you look at all the neighbors at that time, everybody was building like this, except Cirebon. Cirebon is the odd one out. Cirebon did not, and Cirebon is such a special case, it will need a separate lecture to talk about it. Yeah, but it either had 2 tiers or 3 tiers. In the case of Jepara, that's the most interesting because, as you know, after 1511, Jepara sent one expedition by itself. It led one expedition to try and expel the Portuguese. So Jepara, and along with many other Pesisir Javanese port cities, had very close links with Malaka. Very close links. There were many Pesisir Javanese traders in Malaka. They were resident in Malaka. And the close relationship was such that Jepara tried to oust the Portuguese out of Malaka after 1511. And Stavorinius, writing in 1774, says that old Jepara's ruins of an old stone mosque and tombs could still be observed. He's referring, of course, to this 1660s stone mosque that had 5 tiers. So Jepara had this, a stone mosque of 5 stories. That by 1774, Stavorina says we can find the ruins. That's old Jepara. There's a new Jepara now. Yeah, that's really magnificent. So unfortunately, we don't have an image like that for Malaka. Very, very unfortunate. Other examples. This is Cirebon. So Cirebon also has stone elements, a stone mihrab like that that's carved, stone medallions on a stone on a brick wall. So the same motifs are also used on the wood panel. If you go to Kudus, the Chungkup or the mausoleum wall is of stone, and on the stone you find these motifs. So some of the possible, this is all the same period. Kudus is just after the Malacca conquest, but it's that same general period. In Demak, this ornament style was custom ordered from Vietnam, their tiles. In Jepara, again Jepara, this is another mosque. This is the mosque of Mantingan, which is the Mausoleum Complex, not the old Jepara stone mosque. But we know it would have had an original context that is not there anymore. All of these medallions would have fitted into a scheme like this, which has been lost, or scheme like that. Right? They have specific shapes in a visual vocabulary that would have been coordinated on wall panels. Now it's completely lost. It's very sad to see how they embedded, not anyhow, it's nicely arrayed, but it lost the context, right? It looks like so much that trophies from some travels you just paste. It's quite sad, actually, because, we don't know what the context was. You find it everywhere. You find it littered on all the old mosques of Java, So I asked earlier how many roof tiers did Malacca Sultanate Mosque have. Most likely, it could have been 5, because Jepara had 5. Demak does not have 5, because Demak, the royal line of Demak has some question marks if you read the sources. And Banten, on the other hand, had consolidated its hold. And so it seems that whenever a kingdom was more consolidated, it had 5 roof tiers. Brunei had 5 roof tiers. So in 1578 at Kota Batu, which is not today's Kampung Air, the Spanish source, which was there to burn down the whole settlement, and they burned down the mosque as well, stated that Brunei's royal mosque had 5 roof tiers. So quite likely, Malaka's mosque would also have had 5, like Aceh, like Banten, and so on, and of course Jepara. And so that's it. And I just wanted to show you that a successor state to Malaka and Johor, right, Riau in the 1700s, had this as the form of the mosque depiction. A bit strange, but therefore, we're quite sure in knowing that there was a continuity of tradition in the tiered roof mosque. I think this is a fair attempt at depicting that. So just to summarize the 15th century. I think I'm probably running out of time, right, Raza? You got to tell me. Is it good? Okay. So I finally come to the end of the section where I wanted to talk about 15th century Malacca in its context. I really wanted to walk you through the whole context because I know it's so unfamiliar to all of us. And it's something that if we were to open a book, a lavishly illustrated book on Islamic art, we would never see. Because this region's Islamic art and architecture is just not there. It's just not in international surveys. And we are the poorer for it because we don't even know how to discuss it. We have not even started. Yeah, so Malacca's Royal Stone Mosque to me is really important in that story. It's one of the missing pieces. And I think I won't read the points, but I hope I've already kind of gone through it all. But the most important thing for me is the site. It's at the Famosa Tower, right there. Okay, so Surah Warisan is wrongly cited. It's also not the right approximation. It's too small. Yeah. The foundations, if Malacca is now digging all the foundations of the fort, right? There's also the foundations of Formosa, which seems to me to have been, no, not seems to me, it's exactly where, because there is a Portuguese account saying that's where we built the fortress tower, on the mosque. So it's not my conjecture there, I have to emphasize that. Now we go on to what we see today, 17th century Malacca's legacy. So the extant mosque, so Kampung Hulu Mosque. So now when you see this, you will know, wow, how precious it is that in Malacca, we at least have these buildings. Because they are the continuation of that lost legacy. Where else in the Malayan Peninsula can we see this? Nowhere else. Something as old as the 17th century. Where? Kampung Laut, yes. Right? Kampung Laut, Kampung Laut, Kelantan, Kota Baru. But not in the kind of concentration in an urban setting like this. But it's not so easy as that. Because in Malacca, the number of renovations they have gone through is so numerous that we have to kind of really discuss it layer by layer and bit by bit. So Kampung Hulu is one magnificent example. I want to start with looking at the minaret. So the minaret is a later addition. And we know that the person endowing it was a Hadrami Arab merchant. And what's interesting about the profile is it's not exactly like the Hadrami towers, but it seems to resemble it very uncannily, doesn't it? It's like an approximation if you ask a colonial architect more accustomed to building lighthouses and using classical architecture to build these loggias. That would be how they approximate the Hadramaut minarets. A good Hadramaut minaret can be found in Bogor's Arab Mosque at Empang, like that. It's still there today. And also in An-Nawir Pekojan in Jakarta. This one has French ornamentation, like these rusticated arches, and then these antefixes. But you can still get the overall profile of the Hadramaut minaret. So now I kind of hope you can kind of see this as an approximation of a Hadramaut mosque, minaret, but not quite. And we're only just talking about the minaret. How about Kampung Keling Mosque? Now this keeps being discussed as a Chinese pagoda, which to me couldn't be more wrong. Why? Okay, why? I mean, doesn't it look like a Chinese pagoda? Actually, not at all. If you only knew, that's Kampung Keling. Tamil Nadu has Nagor Dargah. Now, Nagor Dargah has this kind of a minaret. Please don't tell me this is a Chinese pagoda. It is not. And it has these niches that you see. Can you see the niches? These are light niches. Now, in Hindu tradition, these were niches for light, candles. Deepastamba. That's the name of these towers in the Hindu context. And actually in good temples, big temples from Portuguese Goa and Kerala, the other side. So Kerala is Malbari, so the other side. So Tamil Nadu is this side, Kerala is the other side. But if you go to Kerala, you'll be able to find Deepa Stamba or Deep Stump. Deepa, we know the word Deepa, right? Untuk lampu, pelita lilin. So Deepa Stamba, Deep Stump. That's what these towers were called in the pre-Islamic context. So it's not just us translating into the Islamic context. And more importantly, in Nagor Dargah, the Peria Manara was, Manara is of course from the Arabic, Nar is fire. Yeah? So it's the light tower, fire tower. That's one supposed etymology of the Arabic term Manara, Nar, from fire. But anyway, is by, you can see it, is by Pratap Singh. So a Sikh ruler endowed the tallest minaret in honor of Shahul Hamid, the wali who is buried here in the Dargah. Dargah is a Sufi shrine, not shrine, but Sufi commemorative mausoleum. Yes, I guess that's the best way to say it. Makam. Yeah? So it has 5 minarets like that. But I want you to notice what is at the top. It has no pavilion, right? So likewise, if you go to Singapore, this is Jamek Chulia, no pavilion. It immediately, so this is quite a miniaturized approximation. These are all miniaturized approximations of the Nagor Dargah 5 minarets, as well as a deep stump. And then you also have other versions that are octagonal. If you go to Masjid Kapitan, can you see it right there? That's also a miniature version. And this is, I'm showing you here this example by comparison because it's different already. Yeah? But it has elements of an admixture between the Hadramaut minaret. It's so washed out because the photo is actually very clear. This is, of course, Masjid Lebo Aceh, yeah, Kampung Melayu in Pulau Penang. But anyway, my point here is that we then have to contextualize the fact that these minarets have something different in Southeast Asia, or in Malaka in particular. It has this loggia or the pavilion at the top. And not only that, it has, what are these? The Sulur Bayung and the, what are those, right? What are these? Why do we have this at the top? If you go to Hadramaut, the minaret will not have this finial, and it will not, again, if you go to Tamil Nadu, the minaret will not have these ornaments at the top. So that's where it becomes a new Creole architecture, an eclectic one. So it has this, it is a Chulia minaret, and yet it has these Javanese elements, which is very different from what you would find in Tamil Nadu. So if you again come back to Malaka and look closely at yet another set of minarets, set because there are 2. I'm very intrigued how a surau in Tengkara would have had a minaret, but it apparently did. So this is the surau minaret, and this is the current Masjid Besar Tengkara minaret. And unfortunately, it's rather washed out, but if you look carefully, again, it has a finial and it has also Sulur Bayung at the corners. So this also is often called a Chinese pagoda, the Masjid Tengkara Tower. And if you're not careful, this also will be called Chinese pagoda. But both are actually Chulia minarets, yeah, with this kind of niche that we are encountering earlier here. Yeah? So it's a pattern. Having these niches is a pattern of the deep stump or Deepa Stamba, yeah, which is translated into minaret form. Just as a comparison, you know, the minaret form in other places, the 1569 minaret of Banten. So Java always fascinates a little bit more to me. So it actually has a geometricized abstraction of the Kala Makara doorway into the base of the minaret, you know. So, and then it has this finial, can you see? So it looks like a lighthouse. It has a lot of ornaments on it that hark back to Javanese ornamentation on buildings. And then it has the finial like that, yeah, which you also find in the Melaka Mosque that we saw. So all these are markers of the fact that these are localized forms. So I'm very dismayed to find that the dossier submitted to UNESCO for Malaka's listing as a World Heritage Site states that it has a distinctive Chinese pagoda-like pyramid-tiered roof form. So it's really wrong. It's really, really wrong. I mean, it does violence to all the history that we can put together. Yeah, just in one fell sweep, in just how many words? Everything I just told you has been nullified. Buang dalam tong sampah sudah. Right? Because what for? That's the explanation there. Chinese pagoda-like pyramid form. I think it's a real problem because we don't know our own history. We don't know it enough. We don't know it at all, actually. And then it appears to have numerous structures, affinities with the Mosque of Bantam. I'm not sure why Bantam was singled out. Actually, it's really a more general tradition across the archipelago. So there's a lot of things there that maybe, we need to rethink. There, the caption actually says, where is it? I can't remember where it is. I think maybe it's not here, but somewhere it says that this is a Chinese pagoda again. So I find it really regrettable that Masjid Kampung Keling's obvious Chulia minaret has been kind of mistakenly, misidentified. Just to show you one forgotten site, because it's too new perhaps to be sanctified as a historical site, is the Indian Muslim shrine of the Persatuan India Muslim Melaka. She's a BV, I can't remember, what is her name, something BV. Yes, thank you. So you see her, or rather the front of her shrine has these niches again, the recurring theme to identify something as being from South India. And guess what? We see these triangular niches on the elements that accompany the shrine of shrines of Malaka. Right? These triangular elements are also on Banten, but slightly different. They become an ornamental system that you also see here, a faint echo of it. And they appear everywhere, these niches. They appear on all sorts of contexts. This is at Tanjung Keling. Maybe that's why it's Tanjung Keling. Hang Tuah's tomb, right? This is in Kampung Keling. Hang Kasturi's tomb, it's called. This is Hang Jebat's tomb at Kampung Jawa. So what are we looking at here? I'm sorry, I put the makara there to talk about, not to associate it with the makams at all. I'm just talking about stoneworking traditions. Because these triangular niches don't seem to belong with the Chandi tradition. So it's not Malayo-Javanese. It's something else, right? One fascinating site is the Datuk Manila, which also has all these niches, again. That's one niche right there. And the pavilion form is also something I want you to take note of. If you recall, the Portuguese reference earlier said that some small buildings and tombs also were built of stone. We might here be looking at the survival of that Sultanate era building form. So these pavilions are based off of wooden structures with a tiered roof. Can you see? This one shows two tiered roofs and then a finial. Yeah? So it seems that this is the kind of tomb structures that may have existed. So if we go back, the kinds of tomb structures right there that may have already existed in the Sultanate period that were completely dismantled, but they have survived and they still can be seen in Malaka today, for these tomb buildings. Again, they have not really received proper study. There's also this kind of building, but I don't see this as related to the tradition that we saw earlier. Perhaps because this is newer and so it's simplified, but probably something like this in wooden form would have provided the basis for the kind of tiered roof pavilion that we saw there. And then finally, I want to end with looking at the roof ridges. So Melaka Tengkara Mosque is interesting because it actually has not one finial, but two. So it has the Malay Sulur Bayung at the end of a Chinese ridge which has a swallowtail. That's a Chinese swallowtail ridge end. And then that's the Malay Sulur Bayung, which is this very fragile wooden thing affixed to the end of the concrete ridge. I mean, how much more fantastic can you get? That's really, really odd, because I think what happened is the Chinese contractors were, okay, but what we do is when we do the ridge, we must end with the swallowtail. So we put the swallowtail here, and then at the end, we put the Sulur Bayung lah, Ken. I don't know, I'm making a joke out of it, but it's quite interesting, right? I mean, how did they decide? Do we have somebody we can interview? I don't know. But that's really fascinating. There's two different traditions there, and it's because of our reliance at that time on Chinese contractors. And if you look at Masjid Angka in Jakarta, 1761, it has the same thing. Chinese swallowtail, sulur bayung at the end. Sorry, I have a better photo, but I couldn't dig it out. So I have my own photos, much clearer, but you can see it anyway, right here. So, you know, it's this, and then you go to Kelabang Besar, same thing. Right? You get the, oh, not same thing. I wanted to show Kelabang Besar because it has the swallowtail ridge on the gateway, which is obviously in this case a Chinese gateway, through and through. It's not even hybrid. This is a Chinese gateway, right? There is a different form of the Malay gateway, but that's not a Malay gateway right there. But what the contractors, again these are Chinese contractors, have done in Kelabang Besar is to render the sulur bayung this time in cement, not in wood. So this one, the sulur bayung, is in cement. Not like this. This is in wood. This is in wood. This is in cement. So it's quite interesting. So if you look at this old reference, I forget suddenly the name of that. He goes by the nickname Nakula. So he has redrawn 5 different roof ridges from Melaka Mosque, showing you the variations. And this one, you can guess, is the one from Tenggara, the one with the Chinese swallowtail, and then but he doesn't discuss this. He doesn't kind of talk about this. And of course, I kept mentioning to you the finial, the thing at the top. In Melaka Mosque, as late as the 60s, I read an account saying that villagers would gather coral rock and pass the material and cook the lime to make this, what in Malaka is called the pasu bunga, or the, nobody calls it momolo. In Javanese, it's called momolo. And one of the terms for it is mustaka. But there's no definite term for this in Malaka as far as I know. But people know that they need to make it, or rather they feel they need to make it for a mosque, as late as 1960s. If you go to any historical mosque of Malaka, you will find it. It's a bit washed out, but if you really, really took a good binocular or whatever, you know, a teropong, or a good camera that you can digitally zoom, and you really, really took a close look at all the finials of Melaka Mosque, then you realize they're very detailed. They're very finely crafted. And for that, in that sense, they are comparable to what is still very much alive in Java. Here in the peninsula, it's dead. Nobody knows how to make these things. It's not a living tradition. In Java, it's very much alive, whether it is in terracotta or in metalwork. Right? And the interesting thing for me is that in Java, this finial is called the momolo, the Brahmamula, and it refers to the elixir of life. So it's just a symbolic ornament today. In Malaka, it is the ridges that are called prabung som. Soma or som, it depends on, you know, for example, it's dip or dipa, depending on which Prakrit language you're looking at. So it's som or soma, referring to the elixir of life. So prabung som is referring to the fact that at the top is the som or soma, and this is the prabung to the som. So it's referring to the same symbolism as the Javanese, which is the old elixir of life symbolism. And that's why you have a pot. There will always be a symbolic pot at the top. That symbolic pot at the top, guarded by wings, that is the pot, the bunga, pasu. Actually, it was supposed to be pasu, but somehow somebody decided to call it pasu bunga, I'm not sure, but it's pasu. It's pasu, the elixir of life's vessel, at the summit of this mountain analogy that makes up the mosque. I'm very worried when I say these things, suddenly somebody will say we should stop building such mosques because the references are pre-Islamic. Because you don't understand that this is a translation. Okay, and for generations, people know that was what it meant, but that's not what it means today. It's just a symbolic form. Yeah? In fact, for that matter, can I just add a little bit? You know, all the mosques that we sanctify as Islamic architecture don't come from Muslim societies before that. The dome is from Zoroastrian religion. They saw it as the firmament of heaven. So should we stop building domes because that was a Zoroastrian firmament of heaven symbolism? That's ridiculous, right? How about the Ottoman mosque? Oh, that's very Islamic. No, it's not. It's based on the basilica. It's based on Hagia Sophia, which was a basilica. So it's not Islamic. It's not Islamic, right? Just like the churches, you think, oh, you know, that form, only Gothic architecture, yes, is an original invention. But actually, when you look at the basilicas that are used, well, the name itself is basilica. Having that dome, that is pre-Christian. So for them as well, for other religions as well. right? And then when we mistake something like Chinese architecture as Buddhist, that's also wrong. Chinese architecture existed before Buddhism came from India, right? So today when you see Chinese-style Buddhist temples, we say, oh, ini Buddhist architecture. Tidaklah. Chinese architecture was already like that before Buddhism. So I'm trying to here argue for the fact that we don't look at this and say, oh, oh, that means, then like that, you cannot build any traditional mosque form. All the traditional mosque forms that we know of are not from Islamic sources initially. They were adapted for Islamic use. So that's really key. For our lack of self-confidence in Southeast Asia, our lack of self-confidence saying, oh, we're not Islamic enough, we better stop. Yeah, that is that kind of, we don't know the history of Islamic architecture in general and how to emplace our own within it. So these ornaments, all are abstractions of what would have been at the edge of the Prabung Som. So now they are sulur bayung. So that's the Malay spirit in saying, okay, we're not going to depict the naga. Instead of depicting the naga, we depict sulur bayung lah. Now that's a very Islamic move. So in Islamic move, what is called the Arabesque is always floriation, sulur-suluran, yeah, to render something into, there is a geometric basis to these floriations too, actually. There is a geometric basis to their harmonized flows and how they sprout and how they are connected to each other. So actually these very, very microscopic ornaments so high up on the mosques have such deep meaning we cannot really see with our own eyes when we look at the mosque. But it's so fantastic. It's such a marvelous thing to ponder about. These things that you can't really see, right? It's not in your eyes. It's so high up. You can't see. This is how many times digital zoom to see all of these details, And it's a bit blur, unfortunately. But can you see that? Look at that. It almost looks like a hand. It almost looks like that. And these details as well. So this one is at the top of Masjid Kampung Keling. And at Masjid Kampung Keling is quite interesting. The edge of these two ridges is rendered with this motif. It's a stamp. And then at the end of this one is a somewhat Hokkienized sulur bayung. It's not really sulur bayung. It's the kind of curlesque motif you find on Hokkien temples. So I think there's a bit of failure of translation there. But never mind, it's interesting as a cultural artifact. I shouldn't have said failure, but it's rather interesting in that sense. I will skip through the next few slides because they are elaborations on the theme of hybridized ornament. Because I think you know my point right now. My point being that these are all hybridized ornaments that you find as a kind of, I don't want to use the term baroque, but it's that kind of similar sentiment, in a very vibrant port community setting, which had the money. And so they endowed funds, people donated funds, and you have all these beautiful tiles, you have the iron columns, yes, in the Melaka mosques. So it's a kind of donation, people want to wakafkan, so they say, they will always endow things to beautify a mosque. And that included beautifying the ridges when they were rebuilt. Yeah, all of these ornaments that you see. But the ornaments have a deeper cultural significance within the context of Malay and Nusantara Islamic culture. And then finally, we can look at the minbars. Now, Malaka's minbars are very, very fascinating as cultural artifacts. Again, if we could do a proper study of these, it would be wonderful. I have not really started. I've only looked at them as objects. I have not looked at them in terms of their histories of production. So actually, is it even traceable? Is it in the archives or is it more recent? That means somebody who's a great-grandson will be able to tell you. I don't know. But all of these have a standard format. And that is they have the sulur bayung, right? And then they have the encrustations on the prabung. And then they have these abstractions of the winged gate, which you find, I could compare, if you go to Cirebon, if you go to Kudus, if you go to all sorts of Javanese sites, you will always have these winged gates. The most magnificent in Java is Sendang Duwur. It has these huge wings on a gate. So that analogy of a winged gateway is what is at play here. A winged gateway before you take the steps up to the little pavilion with the pasu or the momolo, and then the sulur bayung. So there's a standard format. Now, in many cases, the mark of Chinese carvers is evident. So the ornament on the panels might be Chinese, but the overall typology is not Chinese, although it resembles very much some Chinese palanquin. So there's always this kind of gray area. But we know, of course, that such pavilions were built, and these kinds of gates were built in the Javanese and Malay cultural, Malay meaning you can include Sumatra cultural repertoire, even in the pre-Islamic period. So I'm trying to there and place the very elaborate ornamentation into a very, it's quite easy to picture, you know, the format that the Melaka historical mimbars take or assume. It's very standard. Once you recognize it, you realize with all the variations, it's always the same. So there is, you can speak of a Melaka mimbar, right, despite the variations. The other variation I wanted to talk about is this really interesting creative form of the mosque hall, which is you have the 4 core columns, and then you have a row of ornamented columns, whether they are, in this case, wrought iron, or in the case of Kampung Kling, it would be these Corinthian columns, right, with arches. So these would therefore be at the front row, and then this is the 4 core columns. So that's another very distinctive Melaka feature. In regard to the treatment of the interior. Another would be, and you find this in some Jakarta mosques, the fact that there's an upper gallery connecting the 4 core columns. Yeah, so there's that too. In terms of the ornamentation of the column, this is quite typical of the work of Javanese craftsmen. But as I said, the wood is procured from Borneo. Finally, I want to talk about the masonry minarets. Only in Malaka, again, is really fascinating, only in Malaka. The kind of hybrid minaret that developed in the course of the late 19th century became a tradition on its own. So people started building versions of this kind of beautiful. Now, can you recognize this is still chulia, but not quite anymore? Because it's no longer deep stump. It's no longer the small little niche for the lamp. It's now a proper window. It's magnificent, you know. And then now it has these, so this is, where is this from? Right, now it has these parapets. But it still has the finial, and it still has the set. In some cases, they are really small symbolic representations of the Sulur Bayung. So you have all these elements complete and reproduced in all sorts of variations across old Melaka mosques. It's just magnificent. So Melaka is really, really special in that sense. In terms of the creation of a new Creole. And if you look at the representations today, it's kind of like, okay, we want to copy it a little bit, right? But I think it's copying it without really understanding what is being copied. For example, this as well. So you've got these copies today. The copies today look a bit kaku, right? A bit kaku. I don't know whether you agree. Okay, this is very insulting to whoever designed it, but I'm so sorry. But I mean, if you look at the old copies, they were so beautiful. And today's copies look so macam tak cantik. So maybe it's because we don't know what we are looking at. I am not sure. But I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy to see people are attempting to continue the tradition. But I'm not so sure about the neo vernacular kind of. So I'm a bit ambivalent here. But I wanted to end on the note that this is what's happening today in Malaka. Whether it's good or bad, I withhold any kind of judgment. But terima kasih, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Imran. Is that okay if we ask you questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we can't see it from the ground, the details, so who is it meant to be? Who is it meant for?
It's like a profound question already, the way you phrased it. Yeah, it's actually quite an interesting question. Who was it meant to be seen for? You know, sometimes I wonder if the craftsperson's ethos is bhakti, which is also actually a Sanskrit term, right? I mean, you're building a mosque. It's not about whether people see it or not. You're building a mosque. So whatever you're doing for ornamenting it is good deed. It might have been like that. But of course, in terms of the cultural and artistic history of it, we understand that a lot was invested in the symbolic potency of the thing at the top, the apex. So from the aesthetic and this old symbolic worldview point of view, the mustaka or the finial was very important indeed. And so a lot of attention was lavished to making sure the details are correct. Yeah. But as to whether it's meant for somebody to see or not, I cannot really answer. I will refrain from any kind of metaphysical speculation. But suffice to say, a lot of, I mean, the whole reading of it, whether you want to call it ritualistic, symbolic reading of it, has also been overlaid with Sufi readings. But that's more at a kind of metaphysical level, not at the fine detail level. There's even been explanations on the levels of the finial ornament, not the roof, just the finial ornament itself, having certain number of levels, translating into certain, for example, Sufi ideas about martabat tujuh and so on. So I've also read that. So it may or may not always be the most important factor, but this kind of translation allows an ornamental system from before Islam to continue to have meaning within an Islamic context. So that's not kind of answering your question as in you are asking who will see it, but I'm kind of answering why did they continue making it in such an elaborate way, with so many rules, when it probably meant nothing. Well, I'm trying to say for many people it seems to have meant something. And actually some of these meanings are supposed to have been half hidden, or hidden in fact. So you were not supposed to know anyway. It's just, those in the know would know and those who don't wouldn't. Yeah.
Any questions? Okay. If you can please say your name first and then ask questions.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Doktor, my name is Muhammad Suhail. Saya nak tanya dalam bahasa Melayu.
Boleh.
Doktor, berkenaan dengan Melaka, banyak yang mengatakan masjid itu ada pengaruh seni bina Cina. Dan macam yang doktor sampaikan tadi, tak banyak diceritakan tentang mungkin pengaruh Cina tu. Dan mungkin sekarang ini kita memandang mungkin ada renovation yang zaman yang moden ataupun zaman kini. Kalau kita merujuk kepada apa yang disebut oleh Prof. Liang Liji yang menceritakan hubungan pada abad yang ke-15, hubungan baik Melaka dan Cina berzaman dinasti Ming itu menunjukkan yang Cheng He atau Cheng Ho telah banyak membuat hubungan baik, termasuklah hubungan sesama Islam.
Ya,
Seperti membina masjid di Semarang. Kemungkinan di situ datangnya pengaruh Cina dalam pembinaan masjid. Jadi adakah doktor ada maksudnya kaitan tentang hubungan Ming dengan Melaka yang mungkin menyebabkan akhirnya kita hari ini pun kata banyak seni bina Cina. Itu soalan saya.
Terima kasih atas soalan itu, kerana memang soalan yang penting yang patut kita telusuri jawapannya sepenuhnya. Yang saya maksudkan tadi, tidak ada unsur Cina pada typologinya. Kerana kalau kita lihat di negeri Cina pun, masjid Chinese Muslim tidak ada bentuk seperti ini. Carilah, tak ada. Bukannya bentuk tajuk yang ada 4 tiang tu, tidak. Jadi di China, negeri China, ada satu jenis hall, bangunan yang bumbungnya datar begini. Dia ada perabung datar. Dia bukannya perabung piramida. Dia perabung datar tau. Kalau orang Jawa bilang limas. Kalau di Jawa, bumbung limas itu digunakan untuk serambi, bukan untuk masjid. Kecuali Cirebon. Tapi Cirebon itu lain lagi. Dia bukan tipologi Cina juga. Sangat rumit. Dia ada 12 tiang utama, tak ada menyerupai satu pun tipologi Cina. Jadi kalau kita lihat dari segi seni bina kayu kan, pertukangan kayu, kita harus faham tentang format kayunya, kerangka kayunya tu. Ya, dia punya tiang dan juga dia punya balok-balok tu. Ya. Jadi kalau kita baca bangunan dari pemahaman seperti itu, maka tajuk atau masjid tajuk kalau bahasa istilah Jawa dia, atau masjid bertingkat ini tidak ada persamaan dengan masjid Chinese Muslim. Ya, baik yang dah runtuh ataupun yang masih wujud, tak ada. Dan Cheng He juga kalau dia bikin masjid di Semarang itu, masjid itu juga bentuk yang saya bilang tadi limas itu, bukannya masjid tajuk. Ya. Dan kalaupun kita dapat lihat bangunan yang macam pagoda, maknanya segi 8 misalnya, di dalam kompleks masjid Cina, bangunan seperti itu tidak digunakan sebagai ruang liwan atau solat. Bangunan seperti itu digunakan sebagai apa yang dinamakan moon gate. Tidak ada cara untuk menterjemahkan moon gate itu ke dalam istilah Melayu atau Inggeris, kerana fungsinya tidak sama dengan, dia bukan gate. Moon gate tu dia macam gate, tapi dia juga tower untuk memandang bulan. Jadi apa gunanya untuk masjid? Tak tahu, tapi digunakan. Jadi seperti menara, tapi bukan menara juga, masih mengekalkan maknanya dalam kebudayaan arkitektur Cina. Faham kan? Maknanya tak apalah, memang tak ada moon pavilion dalam arkitektur Islam, tapi dalam arkitektur Cina ada. Jadi kalau masjid Cina tu betul-betul besar, nanti dia ada moon pavilion. Seperti gateway dan seperti menara, tapi bukan. Jadi tradisi masjid Cina lain sekali. Tidak ada satu pun elemen arkitektur dalam masjid Jawa atau Melaka. Yang ada, ini bahagian kedua jawapan saya, yang ada adalah ornament yang berunsurkan pertukangan Cina yang terlibat dalam sama ada pembinaan asal, sebahagian, bukan pembinaan seluruh tau. Pembinaan sebahagian, maknanya ada kolaborasi. Pertukangan Cina dengan Jawa, dia collaborate. Ada dari segi ornament. Ornamentnya bermacam-macam. Misalnya ada bentuk singa. Singa dalam kebudayaan Jawa ada. Di Borobudur dah ada singa. Jadi singa yang kadang-kadang kita lihat, oh tapi yang ini singa Cina. Jadi maknanya ada tukang Cina yang membuat singa ini di misal di pintu masuk ke makam Sunan Giri. Ada unsur Cina pada tapi Cina pun bukannya bukannya China. Ada satu sarjana lain ini namanya Helen Nyoto. Pada kesimpulan beliau teman saya tu, dia berpendapat singa itu adalah singa Vietnam, bukannya dari China. Dan ada pertalian antara Vietnam dengan Jawa, kerana Vietnam itu adalah pemasar tile yang tadi saya tunjuk di Masjid Demak dan sebahagian tempat lain, yang khusus dibuat dengan corak itu oleh orang Jawa. Jadi maknanya orang Vietnam bikin tile yang macam itu khusus untuk pasaran Jawa sahaja. Tak ada orang lain, itu custom made. Jadi ada macam-macam, jadi rumit sekali. Istilah unsur Cina ini sangat rumit. Dia lebih kepada artistic exchange, pertukaran ataupun perdagangan dari kesenian, bukannya dari tipologi bangunan. Jadi saya harap saya dapat jelaskanlah soal ini, ya. Kerana masjid Cina tu lain, beza sekali. Kalau kita tengok buku yang bagus tentang masjid Cina, lain. Very interesting actually topik tu. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Any more? Yeah, okay, please. State your name first and your question.
Terima kasih. Nama saya Ramli, ya. Jadi daripada huraian, maaf saya tanya dalam bahasa Melayu.
Boleh.
Dalam huraian you membincangkan evolusi seni bina kononnya masjid lah. Yang saya tahu dan saya pun dapati yang doktor ada mengatakan yang dalam pembinaan tu, dalam seni bina bangunan kononnya, katakan rumah Allah lah, tempat orang beribadat, kononnya tidak ada pengaruh Islam lah. Betul tak? Tidak ada pengaruh Islam untuk mempengaruhi, membina bangunan-bangunan rumah ibadat ini.
Okey.
Betul tak? Jadi bukan, soalan saya, kenapa selama Islam telah masuk ke wilayah ni, region ni, kenapa mereka tidak dapat inspirasi daripada kononnya kalau adanya Islamic architecture untuk menambah baikkan lagi architecture seni bina rumah-rumah ibadat itu?
Kalau saya dapat jawab dengan betul, okey, saya harap saya dapat jawab dengan betul. Maknanya saya harap saya dapat faham dengan betul apa soalan Encik. Saya rasa soalan Encik berpusat pada apakah seni bina Islam itu sebenarnya. Cuba kita ambil contoh masyarakat Islam di lain tempat. Misal kata masyarakat Islam di China. Apakah kita akan bertanya soalan yang sama? Kenapa masjid-masjid di China dibina dalam seni bina Cina. Kenapa mereka tidak mengambil seni bina Arab ke, Turki ke, Parsi ke dan bikin seperti Putrajaya? Sebabnya ialah dahulu setiap masyarakat itu mempunyai trust yang sangat kuat di dalam kebudayaan sendiri, termasuklah pertukangan dan seni bina serta ragam hias. Dan maknanya yang sangat mendalam dan bermakna untuk masyarakat itu sendiri. Jadi kalau kita berpaling pula ke orang Parsi atau berpaling ke orang Turki, mungkin kita akan bertanya soalan yang sama. Kenapalah orang Turki ni, dia bikin masjid, dia ikut Hagia Sophia. Itu kan bukan Islam. Hagia Sophia tu basilika besar Bizantium. Misal kalau kita ambil jalan yang sangat cara berfikir yang pola begitu. Tapi kan sudah diolah menjadi seni bina yang sekarang kita anggap Utsmaniyah. Kerana sudah diubah suai. Kan? Sudah diubah suai Hagia Sophia itu menjadi Masjid Utsmaniyah. Dalam rangka pikiran yang sama, semua masjid yang saya tunjuk tadi sudah menjadi bangunan Islam. Kerana seperti yang saya mulakan tadi, masjid tidak sama dengan bangunan meru. Masjid juga tidak sama dengan bangunan wantilan. Sudah ada perubahan yang sangat ketara untuk menjadikan tipologi itu masjid. Kalau kita lihat bangunan itu, waktu kita di zaman Melaka, kita tahu ini masjid, bukannya apa-apa lain. Kita tahu. Jadi sebenarnya salah kalau kita bilang ini bukan. Maksud saya tadi ialah, kalau kita nak bilang Islamic architecture, sebenarnya akar ukurnya dari luar Islam. Kerana Islam itu sendiri secara historical, bukan secara harfiah, secara historical, masyarakat yang dipanggil Muslim hanya wujud setelah tahun berapa? Abad ke berapa? Jadi sebelum itu, ya mungkin awak boleh bilang ini Muslim, tapi lain kan? Tak sama. Jadi yang kita bilang Muslim architecture, we start from the Hijrah era. And before that, we don't consider. Jadi, bangunan yang wujud sebelum itu belum atau pra-Islam. Kan? Kalau takkan orang Arab bilang ada zaman jahiliah. So, bila orang Arab pun, let's say masjid Nabi yang cuma menggunakan bangunan rumah. Jadi sebenarnya itu bukan architecture Islam kerana architecture rumah Nabi sudah wujud sebelum orang Arab masuk Islam pun. Kita nak panggil itu rumah Arab jahiliah ke? Taklah kan. Itu dah meremehkan. Jadi maksud saya harap dah jelas sekarang. Ni dah 2 kali saya bilang. Sesuatu yang kita olah semula untuk kegunaan Islam, ia ada akar asal usulnya, susur galurnya dari zaman sebelum Islam. Kalau dalam Jazirah Arab dipanggil jahiliah, kalau di tempat lain kita panggil apa pun, panggillah. Okay, itu bukannya hal yang saya nak bincangkan. Maksud saya, setelah ia diolah semula, ia sudah pun menjadi architecture atau seni bina yang digunakan untuk Islam. Maka dengan itu, seharusnya kita tidak mengedepikan sejarah seni bina Islam yang wujud di Nusantara kerana kita bilang, oh ni tak cukup Islam. Kerana dalil seperti itu salah. Ya, saya harap jelas ya.
Okay, last question, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nama saya Nur Azam Syairi. Saya ada satu soalan. Bagaimana hendak memahami syarahan lebih kurang 1 jam lebih tadi? Bagaimana untuk memahaminya dalam konteks masa sekarang? Apakah relevannya seni bina yang Islam yang telah dikupas tadi dan melihatnya dalam konteks sekarang dan masa depannya nanti bagaimana? Konteks pertanyaan saya ialah begini. Ada satu perkembangan yang menarik untuk Nusantara sejak beberapa tahun yang lalu dalam soal seni bina masjid. Saya merujuk kepada perkembangan yang berlaku di Bandung, Masjid Al-Irsyad dan juga yang terbaru mencetuskan kontroversi yang agak panas, Masjid Al-Safar. kedua-duanya direka oleh Ridwan Kamil. Reka bentuk yang sangat progresif, bebas dan lepas daripada apa saja definisi tentang Islam. Artinya, orang yang melihat bangunan itu sekali lalu tidak akan mengatakan bahawa ini adalah masjid. Dalam konteks apa yang berlaku di Bandung dan juga syarahan tadi, apakah masa depannya untuk seni bina masjid? Terima kasih.
Wah, soalan yang berat sekali. Mungkin jawapan ringkasnya saya nak bilang saya sejarawan bukannya arkitek. Tak adalah. Sejarawan arkitek tapi bukannya practicing arkitek. Jadi saya serahkan soalan itu kepada yang praktis. Tak jugalah. Maksud mungkin apa yang saya nak bilang ialah sebab itulah saya tunjuk contoh-contoh yang terakhir ini. Sebab saya tahu soalan begini akan timbul kerana saya ni jiwa saya sejarah. Jadi saya setiap kali saya berkongsi apa yang saya tahu dari sejarah, soalan ini akan timbul. Awak dah cakap berjela-jela pasal ni semua. Sekarang nak buat apa? Soalannya sama. Jadi setiap kali saya kena. Jawapan saya setiap kali sama juga. Bila kita bertindak sekarang kan untuk merekayasa, kita perlu menggunakan imajinasi. Tapi imajinasi itu bersumberkan ataupun mengambil kekuatannya dari mana? Kekuatannya dari pengetahuan dan kesedaran kita. Yang pincangnya kita sekarang, kita tidak ada isi yang bernas dan penuh dalam pengetahuan tentang sejarah kita sendiri. Saya harap jelas kan? Maknanya, kalau kita nak bikin satu bangunan baru, kita nak bilang, oh kita nak berteraskan ialah apa yang boleh kita kenal sebagai jiwa Islam. Misalnya kata, jiwa seni Islam, bukan jiwa Islam tapi jiwa kesenian Islam. Tapi kita ambil sumber dari mana? Selama ini saya lihat kita akan dengan tidak segan silu atau dengan tidak berfikir dua kali, terus memandang ke barat, the Islamic West. Artinya, Islamic West kita yang paling dekat, Mughal India. Selanjutnya, Isfahan, Samarkand. Right? Seterusnya, you get the drift. Tapi tak pernah pula saya tengok orang lihat Damascus, Damsyik, tidak. Tapi dia skip, dia lonjat ke Uthmaniyah, kemudian lonjat lagi ke Maghribi. Kan? Selalu gitu kan? Jadi dia ambil, diadun, okey ini Islamic. Jadi banyak kawasan yang dilompati, tapi kawasan yang paling dilompati secara jauh ialah kawasan kita sendiri. Ya, kerana kita tidak memandangnya sebagai Islamic. Jadi bukannya saya tidak berada dalam bukan tempat saya untuk untuk menyuruh atau membilang pada orang yang menjadi designer bagaimana untuk mereka bentuk. Terserah pada mereka sendiri. Tapi apa yang saya sayangkan, mungkin kerana isi pembelajaran kita, maknanya apa yang kita belajar di sekolah, itu kosong. Sebab itu, designer kita pun tidak ada pengetahuan dalam dan tidak sempat berfikir dengan cara yang dapat mengolah dengan matang lah. Bukannya mengolah dengan tiru, maksud saya bukan begitu. Kalau mengolah dengan tiru tu senang kan? Mengolah dengan matang. Dan dalam sejarah, setiap kali perubahan atau nafas baru wujud dalam sejarah seni bina, nafas baru itu lahir dari pengolahan yang matang. Sekarang pengolahan yang matang itu sudah tidak terjadi lagi. Dan mungkin sebabnya ialah kita kurang pengetahuan dan kurang mendalami apa yang kita belum tahu. Saya harap itu dapat menjawab sedikit. Jadi macam itulah jawapan saya. Jadi peranan saya sebagai sejarawan begitu. Ya.
Terima kasih kepada English.
Boleh.
We thank you, Dr. Imran, and please show your appreciation. And one announcement: if by any chance you want to listen to Dr. Imran again, we will be having our second talk. Oh, betul?
Betul, betul.
Okay. In Melaka next Sunday at 3 o'clock. So if you miss, if you want to tak puas hati kan, pergilah. It'll be in Bahasa Malaysia. And so, but before we go, we would like to, Melaka in fact, would like to invite our project director to present our memento to our speaker today. Okay, once again, thank you all for coming, and please visit our website, www.melakainfact.com, for any more talks, exhibitions, or other events that we will be holding. So remember, the next one is on next week, Sunday, at 169 Jalan Tengkera in Melaka. So thank you very much.